to the gentleman recognized, the gentleman from Arkansas, Mr. Hill.
Thank the chairman and Chair Yellen. It's nice to see you here and looking fit and rested from all your travels. Thanks for your perseverance in front of us. We've talked before about monetary policy, and I haven't been a fan as a banker before I was in Congress of going beyond the Fed's initial interest rate policies. I felt like QE 1, 2, and 3 didn't produce the GDP effects or the job increases that perhaps Fed policymakers at the time thought. And I've also been concerned that as we go back and look backwards now since 2008, that Fed officials really have always been a little reluctant to talk about some of the unintended consequences of that, such as distorting the price mechanism in our economy, depressing cap rates for commercial real estate, or running up equity prices, which I think are a result when you have that. We've flooded from QE2 into our economy, affecting price earnings multiples, et cetera. But today I haven't heard any discussion about, we've talked about the balance sheet, we've talked about setting interest rates, but I want to talk a little bit about the money multiplier aspect in your toolbox. You know, we've flooded the system with reserves, but we have a money multiplier that's down at Eccles rates, 1930s type rates. And I guess my view is, shouldn't you lower the rate of interest paid on banks on excess reserves as you're raising rates and planning this very thoughtful, careful shrinkage of the Fed's balance sheet?
Well, the interest rate we pay on excess reserves is our key tool to adjust the general level of short-term interest rates in the economy. And the committees deemed it appropriate to gradually raise the level of short-term rates as the labor market has strengthened and we've come closer to achieving our objectives. So no, I wouldn't agree that we shouldn't be using that tool to normalize the general level of short rates in the economy.
The rates on excess reserves.
That is our key tool that we use to adjust
how do we get the money?
How
do we get the money multiplier to increase then?
Well, I guess I don't look at the impact of monetary policy on the economy through the money multiplier. I think.
What do you think accounts for it being at 1930s levels when we've advanced reserves into the system as mightily as we have over the last 8 years?
Well, we had a highly depressed economy where interest rates fell close to zero, and banks were willing to hold on to excess reserves given.
But my colleagues on the other side say that the lending business is booming and the economy is growing successfully. So why is the multiplier not changed? Why is the velocity still low like that?
So,
in your view, that's something we measure. That's how we measure successful Fed policy, by looking at that. So I'm just.
No, I mean, I wouldn't agree at all that we measure the success of Fed policy by looking at the money multiplier. I think the quantity of money and its relationship to GDP has been extremely unstable and not a good way of running monetary policy. I'm not aware of any central bank that would any longer approach it that way.
And why is that? Why is it, though, that it was between World War II and 2008 something that people looked at and it was talked about as a way that shows that we have a healthy investment and lending market and growing economy, but in the 1930s and since 2008 we're just satisfied with it, that it's low, and we don't say it's important anymore? Can you put some perspective on that?
Well, both in the Great Depression and in our more recent Great Recession, we've had a situation where short-term rates fell essentially to 0%, and pushing out additional reserves was essentially what they said during the Depression was like pushing on a string, and we encountered, or a so-called liquidity trap, and the relationship then between the quantity of reserves and nominal income begins to break down in those situations. And we faced a similar situation that is to what we had during the Great Depression.
My time's expired, Mr. Chairman.
Time of the gentleman has